Alrighty. Hello everybody and welcome to Learn to Defend Cyber. My name is Joseph and today we're going to be working on the Try Hack Me Advent of Cyber. We are working on day 9. Day 9 is GRC focused. GRC. Love it or hate it, it is a part of our industry. I do try to do most of these days blind, but as today is ran by a good friend, and you may know the community by name, Simply Cyber's Jerry Ozier, I did go ahead and watch his video, at least half of it. I tried to stay blind as to the challenges in today's event, but I wanted to support him and watch his video. So, I kind of have an idea of what the room is about. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. GRC, made fun of by quite a few, but Dr. Jerry has done great work doing what he strove to do a few years ago. He strove to make GRC socially acceptable, and I think that he has made quite the headway. GRC used to be laughed at, you know, grab your clipboards and your horn rim glasses, let's go talk about how the government does things and how we have to comply with different regulations, policies, etc., etc. Lay out the rules for the business so we can stay safe, right? So I'll pivot over to this view really quick. Hopefully our chat box is working. You should be able to see everything. We do have Rhonda and Kira, welcome. I'm hoping that I have this set up right, so I did throw together a little chat box on the fly. I may have to, hold on. It's hard to test the chat box without chatters in the background, right? I'm not seeing it, so I'm wondering if I have it set up the wrong way. I'm going to poke around here in the background. Please grant me some grace. I want to say that this should be able to come up here. Right, that looks right. Hold on. Yeah, that looks right. Looks like we got it. Hello, Deanna. Okay. Perfect. I think I have it working. It's the Leonardo meme where he sits there and snaps his fingers and points. I see myself. Yes, I'll probably have to fix that in the other scene as well, but that's fine. May I don't like how the username is on the right side. I wish I could not do that. I don't know why the username's on the right side. It's a little weird for me, but I can figure that out later. Okay. For now, it works. I don't know if I just made it stop working by saying it works, but we'll figure that out. No worries. I always try to say people's names correctly. I will not always get it right. I was hoping I got it right when I said it. So, GRC. Governance, risk, and compliance. I have a tendency, and I'm sure that it will happen at least once or twice in this video, and plenty of times in the future. I always end up saying it wrong. It is governance, risk, and compliance. If I'm talking fast and I'm not thinking about what I'm saying, sometimes I'll call it governance, regulation, and compliance because of what you're doing in a GRC position. Governance, risk, and compliance. So it's 3 things that are of one job set, right? Now, you can have job roles that focus on one of the each things, or a combination of 2, or all 3. What it really is it is the workers or the players in a company or in an organization, or maybe it's a third-party organization, who analyzes companies to see how they stand up against controls, be them security controls, or if they have to be compliant to a framework such as PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry's framework. You have different roles throughout this job, this field of GRC, such as auditors. You have policy writers. You have, I mean, there's quite a few different things you can do, right? Auditor is typically your entry-level role if you are trying to break into GRC because you want to make sure companies are doing what they're supposed to do. You can be a third-party auditor, so you work for someone, say you're auditing for CMMC, which is a new, I say new in quotation marks, control framework. Say you're having to audit for CMMC, that's Charlie Michael Michael Charlie, and you have to be audited by a third-party audit organization, also known as a C3PAO for CMMC. Same with Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX. So you could work for companies that go and audit other companies, or you can work internal and do an internal audit. There's quite a few things you can do. So let's go ahead and see what they want us to do today with GRC. McSkitty and Glitch want to hire an e-discovery company. So e-discovery companies typically come in a forensics process. They can come in during other processes as well, but you'll see them most likely during a forensics process. E-discovery companies perform actions such as data mining to try and figure out what kind of information you exactly have, where it is, and what you might need to do with it. For instance, if you have payment card data, or if you have cardholder data, or health data, or insurance data, or social security numbers, it's their job to kind of find that stuff, correlate it, and tell you where it is. I mean, it's a whole thing on its own. I'm not the most familiar with the e-discovery process. I've never been a part of it. I just kind of know what they are and what they do. So, 3 companies. Okay, so, sorry. They want to hire an e-discovery company to process some forensics data for their investigation. They invited bids from third parties for this purpose. 3 companies have bid for the project. McSkitty and Glitch now need to do a risk assessment on all 3 of these companies. You're dealing with sensitive data, right? These e-discovery companies, they're going to come and they're going to get their hands in all of your pies. And you want to make sure that the company that you're hiring is not going to be a huge risk for you. They're not coming in and just giving all your data away to threat actors. They're not doing dumb things like having outdated exchange servers on the internet. They want to do a risk assessment on all 3 companies to identify the one with the least amount of risk so they can move forward. Right, okay, so all companies were sent a questionnaire based on which a risk assessment will be done. I laughed because the questionnaires only work so well, right? You usually send questionnaires to companies when it comes time to bid, because you want them to self-attest what controls they have in place. Self-attestation means that I'm saying what I'm doing correct for security, right? Now, these questionnaires are great because, you know, maybe they're telling the 100% truth, and you can see that they may have some less than scrupulous practices, and you may need to put in some further controls if that's the company you want to go with. But in the real world, sometimes you'll get questionnaires that get yes to death, meaning they just get the questionnaire, there's 5 pages of questions saying, what do you do for X? What do you do for Y? How do you control Z? Etc., etc. And they just go, yes, 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 and say that we are the best company in the world. All of our data is safe. Hire us. And to be quite honest, obviously, if you yes it to death, you're not telling the truth. And even if they say they do, far often than less, they don't provide any kind of evidence, because now they're having to give up a little bit of how their sausage is made. some questionnaires may require that you provide evidence that you have a control implemented, and now you get into the dirty work of, sure, they may have this control implemented on this file server, but is this applied to every file server? Is this applied to everything that interacts with that data? It gets to be quite a mess, and this call to bid, this questionnaire process, vetting out who you're going to use, if you're doing it right, this can take months. Okay, so GRC, we talked about it. Governance, risk, and compliance plays a crucial role in organizations to ensure that their security practices align with personnel, regulatory, and legal obligations. We brushed on legal and regulatory. There's CMMC, Sarbanes-Oxley. I mean, you've got FISMA, you've got PCI DSS, HIPAA. How do you know whether or not you have to comply to certain control frameworks, control sets? That really just, you have to take a look at what your business does, where it's located, who they serve, etc., etc. Let's take a look at some examples in the financial sector. So we got Reserve Bank regulations. So you have a lot of regulations from your Reserve Bank. For instance, we have the Federal Reserve Bank, SWIFT CSP. Banks use the SWIFT network to communicate with each other and send funds. After a massive bank breach resulted in $81 million worth of fraudulent SWIFT transfers, SWIFT created the Customer Security Program, which set a standard of security for banks. So if you are working for a bank, you're gonna have to make sure you have those very, very minimum, or you have to have those controls implemented at the very minimum. Data protection, of course, depending on the security standards by their data regulator, typically PCI DSS here in America, or it's seemingly the Reserve Bank standards. You have to have those in place to operate legally. Now, when you run a large organization from multiple teams, how do you stay on top of all these regulations and ensure good security is applied by all teams? That's pretty hard. GRC comes in. They play a crucial role in understanding external security standards, translating them into internal standards, and then ensuring they are applied by all teams to help reduce the organization's risk to an acceptable level. Now, that is an always ongoing process. You don't just do it once and then come back, because I know if you've ever dealt with any kind of anything involving people, we tend to have an environment that looks perfect for exactly one audit, and then you can come back 2 days later and they've already started taking controls out, because really, and this is serious, a little bit of a lowdown about security controls, and you've probably heard it talked about quite a few times. Security is a sliding scale. The more secure we are, the less we can use what we're using, right? So you can either be secure or you can have it be usable. You want to try and find some middle ground. Governance is the function that creates our frameworks. It is the organization, or that an organization uses to make decisions regarding information security. Governance is the creation of the strategies, policies, standards, and practices in alignment with the organization's overall goal. By the way, if you are taking the CYSA Plus, one of the domains focuses entirely on that. Governance also defines the roles and responsibility that everybody in an organization has to play. So your data owners, your custodians, etc., etc. Risk. This is the big one. This is why everybody in cybersecurity exists. This is why all of us have jobs. This is why GRC in itself is as important as it is, even though it is made fun of on the school playground, is risk, right? If it wasn't for people or processes exploiting everything and taking information and stealing it, we wouldn't have a reason to... I mean, there would be no purpose for us, right? People wouldn't get robbed online. People wouldn't have their information stolen, so there'd be no point. This risk of this happening is in the entire point of everything. You can quantify risk. Now, you can qualify it and just say, yeah, you know, we have a risk. And let's go ahead and define risk. Risk is the likelihood and the impact of one of these vulnerabilities, which is anything that can be exploited that will harm us in some manner. Now, these risks are like how, say I go to bed with my front door open, right? The risk is that I have my front door, or the vulnerability is that I have my front door open. The risk might be that my TV gets stolen. And you can say that it's probably going to happen if somebody walks down the road and sees a TV, then there's no alarm system, no nothing. That's your likelihood, right? And the impact is that I will wake up and there will be no TV. Isn't GRC a fancy term for bureaucracy? Said it and don't forget it. Absolutely. And GRC involves a lot of bureaucracy. I will agree, because you have to try and get as many of the controls in place. And you see how I say as many and not all, because in reality you can't implement every control. You can try, or you can get as close to it, but you really need to just get the minimum for compliance. And a lot of companies are gonna want to do the minimum because doing more is expensive. But the goal is to make it as secure as possible while keeping it useful and having it be able to be used. And then you have to, so to do that, you end up having to put controls in that may not actually be in your security framework that you're using, which, by the way, I can't think of a framework that's 100% secure if you implement all controls anyways, so you always want more controls than are listed. That is a practice called defense in depth, and there's a whole lot about that, right? So risk, you can quantify risk. If you really want to quantify risk, you can get down to the nitty-gritty, where you can look up studies and statistics to say how often, say for instance you have a web server and it's exposed to the internet because you want people to access it, right? You can say, how often does a server get scanned? You find that statistic, X. It gets scanned X amount of times a day, okay? Of those times, how many times is it attacked, right? It's attacked Y times. Now, if you have a vulnerability on it, and this might be getting into the weeds a little bit, I think we talk about it a little bit down here, called the CVSS, which is just a SCAP, Security Content Automation Protocol standard, the CVSS, Common Vulnerabilities Scoring System. I want to say that's what the two S's stand for. Again, I'm horrible with acronyms, so we will fact check me here in a moment. You can look at vulnerabilities, and they're already quantified thanks to that. And you can determine, using those variables, maybe if we have a CVSS of 10, which is like hair's on fire, pants are down, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and you have the statistic of how often these servers are being scanned, and how, if this has an exploit in the wild, which usually tends to, I say usually, but that's a broad stroke statement, you can say that it's very likely to happen, and the impact is more than likely major. So this is a risk we should address right now. Now, if you have a device that's internal to the network, it's completely segmented, and no one can access it unless you're in the building, and it has one function that is not business critical, that has a low asset value at that point, and it could have that same vulnerability, and you may not ever have to address it because no one can access it. No one can do anything. Why do you have to worry about a vulnerability that's on your network if no one's doing anything with it, right? Compliance. The whole meat and potatoes, compliance. A lot of companies only implement cybersecurity because they are required to, because if they don't, they are fined, and they want to make money. So a lot of for-profit companies, which is almost every company, must comply to something. There's NIST, there's ISO, there's GDPR, which is a big one. GDPR has teeth. And that's where a lot of your company policies and standards will come from, and your strategies come from, is these compliance frameworks. And then you'll have to try on your own to implement a few more to make your company a little bit more secure than compliance frameworks require you to be, because As I stated earlier, not all compliance frameworks are built equal, and not all of them are very secure. Now, why are risk assessments done? We did talk about this a lot already. We can kind of gloss over it. It minimizes the risk in what you're doing. In other words, it's not securing data but protecting the business, right? If you have a scandal that happens where 2,000 people's information gets leaked, people hear about it, they don't want to do business with you, right? That's money. Everything boils down to money, or most things boil down to money. So a risk assessment does exactly what it sounds like it does on the packaging. You look at your business as a whole, you look at the controls you have in place, you look at what you do, who you are, your goals, all of your criteria, and figure out what your risk is. Now, be still the GRC analyst's heart. We are going to look at a risk register, and not just any risk register. We're looking at a risk register on a spreadsheet. I know. Hold the applause. People love their spreadsheets in the GRC realm. Now, a risk register is kind of all of the points we've talked about just plotted in a spreadsheet, right? It tells you your overall risk, what you've got, and all your different metrics, right? So we're looking at identification of risks, and these are different examples of risks in an environment. An unpatched web server, high privileged accounts without property security controls. For instance, if you have a domain admin running around and they have no MFA on their account, that's multi-factor authentication, that's probably not good. Third-party vendor who might be infected by a malware, that's third-party risk. So third-party risk is very, very real. Supply chain risk, and this is exactly what we're doing today, is a third-party risk assessment. We're vetting out these vendors. And a system for which support has ended by the vendor and still in production. Oh boy, could I say you never see it, but do you see end-of-life devices all the time? Further from here on, I will just call them EOL devices for sake of brevity. End-of-life devices or EOL devices. You see them all the time. All of the time will you see EOL devices, because they are probably, if they are still in use, hosting some line of business or LOB. May it be an in-house application, or it's a critical file server, or it's one of the only 2 domain controllers and they just haven't built a new one. There's so many reasons why an end-of-life device may still reside in an environment, including Carl. Carl, who's surfing on his Windows 7 HP that he got 15 years ago, even though I don't know if Windows 7 was around 15 years ago, but for hyperbole's sake, let's say it was. He's surfing around on his Windows 7, and because he's a CFO, no one's going to take it away from him, because he says that he loves Windows 7 and no one's taking that device from him, and no one can tell him no. So it states here that there are a lot of other examples of risk. Very true. There's many forms of risk in every environment. We talked a little bit about likelihood earlier. Here you have 1 through 5 measures of likelihood. Improbable, it may never happen. So that example of a computer let's just say a computer that has information and this server is vulnerable, right? This computer is a server, it's vulnerable, and you put it in a safe and you throw it at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's more than likely never going to happen. Remote, very unlikely to happen, but there's still some possibility. Now, instead of it being in the Mariana Trench, it is now just in a heavily armed, guarded facility, and you would have to be James Bond or maybe some super spy to go and get this device, right? Occasional, likely to happen once or sometime. Now we're talking about a device that's maybe network connected. It's a little harder to access on the networking. Maybe you have to have very specific access conditions. Probable, so now we're talking about something that is on your internal network that is probably scanned every day. You could see this all the time. And then frequent, more than likely when you're talking about the frequent statistic, you are talking about something that is in your DMZ, being scanned by the world every single second of every single day. Right? That's a generalization. You know, mileage may vary. There's different ways to to measure frequency, but for sake of today, we'll just say that, right? Assigning impact. Now, impact is a little tougher to measure, right? You could have a server, and servers are very, very sensitive for your network. You know, typically when someone hears the word server, they think, oh man, this does something for the business. You could have a server that's doing almost nothing, right? And maybe you have a vulnerability on it that allows remote code execution, and it gets pwned. The impact of that is very low because this server's not doing anything. It doesn't hold much information. It can't talk to other servers. Now, if that server can talk to other servers, that's where the impact starts to increase a little bit, right? Now we have a little bit more of a problem. This can be used as a pivot point inside of your network, okay? Then we get higher, where this server that has the vulnerability may host sensitive data. That's where we start to get into that high territory, maybe that medium or high territory. We can see it's impacting one part of an organization's operations completely, and you've got major revenue loss. That's where, you know, data's starting to get exposed that shouldn't be. Then you've got the high, where like your hair is starting to be on fire. It may not be quite in flames, but it's smoldering at this point. You've got access to multiple servers, or this could lead access to us getting completely shut down for a day because a firewall's vulnerable to something. And then you've got critical, where where critical is like shut everything off. The company may not exist after this, right? And that, again, hyperbolic, but it gets the point across. Risk ownership. So we kind of talked about this earlier. Who owns risk? Risk is owned by whoever has the final say of the configuration of some process or device. We can go in here a little bit and talk about what goes on with assigning risk. Let's see. Doesn't really sound like the text box is describing who owns risk too much. Hold on. Yeah. So risk ownership. How can you tell who owns risk? It should never be the auditor. The auditor should never own risk. Your GRC people should never own risk. Risk should be owned by, again, as I said, whoever has final say over a process. So typically high-level management. For instance, if you have servers and workstations, that risk should be owned. It should be owned by your top like server admin, or maybe their manager, who might be like a CTO, right? That's who would own that risk. And then you have your custodians and your other roles that we can get into later if they are even relevant to today. If you are interested in all of this, because it sounds like we are actually about to get into the tutorial part, or the part where we actually do a risk assessment. If you're interested in all of this, I would love to point out Dr. Gerald Ozier's GRC Masterclass. I have taken it personally, and quite frankly, I feel as though it is why I do so well in the role I do today. I always wanted to be... Today's a bit of a crisis, like identity crisis moment for myself, because, you know, I always wanted to, from the outside looking in, I always wanted to be a digital forensics analyst, and I wanted to do, you know, the leak coding and all the cool things that you see on the TV. When I was in high school, I wanted to be a pen tester because I heard of ethical hacking and I thought it was amazing. That's like the whole reason I went to college in the first place. And the more I did college and the more I worked in the role that I'm in, I ended up really liking GRC, and I do have to give credit to Jerry that his class made me probably as good as I am today, because it does a great job of defining a lot of these things and explaining them in a great manner, and then giving you some actionable intel and actionable advice. Let's see, I can probably pull this up, so I can just throw it on screen for a second. Just one moment, seeing if I can pull this up. So he has added some things since the last time that I've done it, so it is not 100% complete. Let's see if I can just find it. I want to find it on... Give me one moment. Let me see if I can find it on his site. Simply Cyber Academy. Yep. So the link is academy.simplycyber.io. And I will flash that on screen. Maybe I can, hold on. There we go. I don't think it came up on screen. Give me one moment. I'm trying to figure out why not. Oh, because I have it in the wrong window. Here we go. All right. This is the class I was talking about, the GRC Analyst Masterclass. If you like today, please, please, please go after that phenomenal class. Let's get into it, right? Internal and third-party risk assessments. Internal and third-party. Internal is ourselves. Third-party is anybody else. We talked about why we do it, to identify weak spots that in our security, also known as a gap assessment. Direct resources to the most important areas. We can prioritize our vulnerabilities by identifying how severe risk could be, asset values, all sorts of different things. Stay compliant with security rules. You know, we gotta conform with the law. If you're going to have a business and you want it to not get shut down or fined every day, you gotta be compliant. Why do companies do risk assessments of third parties? For the very same reasons, but more so to make sure that inviting these companies in isn't going to harm you in some way, and maybe we need to figure out what controls we need to put in place if we're going to have a company come in. So, we launched our site. Let me go back down. We launched our site, and here is our... It looks like we have our 3 vendors. Well, I can't click through all of them quite yet. You will have to assess the level of risk that each of the vendors pose. We sent the questionnaire to each potential third party and have received their answers. Using these answers, you'll have to add new risks to the risk register, which will give an overall risk score for each third party. Once done, we can choose whichever third party has the lowest risk score. So, let's look at what we were given. Question 1. Data in transit and data at rest needs to be encrypted with AES encryption as a requirement for this project. What a type of AES encryption does your company use for data in transit? So that we can see that they use AES 256 and AES 256 for data at rest. So they use it for both. AES 256 is pretty strong, right? Okay. Let's see what the instructions want. For each vendor, review the vendor's responses to each question, identify the risks based on their responses, and add them to the risk register. For each risk, provide a clear description of the risk, rate the impact and the likelihood. And then the vendor risk score is the sum of all risk scores for that vendor. So they're using a nice, strong encryption standard for data in transit and data at risk. I don't see anything wrong with this particular part, so we'll just go ahead and say NA for now. Oh, okay, so this is for all 3. Hold on. Give me a moment. All right. I thought this was going to be a question 1. What's wrong with this one? NA. Question 2. What's wrong with this one? Oh, this. Now that we have this figured out, we can go ahead and click through. What kind of access controls do you have to ensure that data is accessed by only people, by only authorized people? And we can see that data can be accessed by all people in the organization. Now that's a big risk, okay? Data can be accessed by all organization members. You do not want all of your organization members. I spelled that wrong. Go ahead and fix that. I'll try to fix that. Oh man. Organization, sorry. It doesn't like me spelling it with a S because UK versus America English. Organization members, you want to actually have that locked down to the least amount of people possible. You only want data to be accessed by the people who need to access the data. And how long do you keep the client data after the case is closed? 1 to 2 weeks. That's not actually very long. That's pretty good in my eyes. Most people hang on to their data for 90 days. That's a pretty typical practice, and if it's not 90 days, it's 120 days. So, really, having data accessed by all organization members, do we have a way in here that they want us to grade it? Because I know how I would grade it. I would say that the likelihood is possible, you know, someone would have to know the data is there and go snooping to find it, and the impact level is pretty high, at least in my eyes, right? So we have, see, we had written down earlier, probable, likely to happen several times. And then high, I would definitely say it's very, very high, depending on the information that we're giving up, right? Go ahead and add that risk. Oh. Oh, it does change it for each one. Ah. Assessment needs review. Assessment indicates significantly lower risk than expected. Would it be critical then? Or just likely and high? They're not saying that this is critical, are they? Oh, they are saying that it is critical. Ah. So apparently the perfect assessment for question number 2 is that the likelihood and impact is both critical and very likely to happen. This is where risk assessments get very, very muddled up, right? You can have 3 people give a risk assessment and have very different opinions on what happens. Now, if it's able to be accessed by everybody, I would say again that's a pretty big deal, right? That's why I think I imagine, or sorry, I did say it's possible. Possible saying that it may occur. You would have to be scanning for it or going looking for it. And the impact, again, it just depends on what kind of data we have. Now, I don't know, I didn't read in here, this is investigation information, so I guess it's more sensitive than I originally stated. But this could be investigation information that's a bunch of nothing. And really, if it gets accessed by everybody, it's not that big a deal. Or this could be company trade secrets, which if it gets accessed by everybody, it's a huge deal. I would say NA, low and low, because that's good. Your assessment indicates a lower risk than expected. Are they wanting them to use a higher... Are they wanting them to use a higher form of AES than 256? Because 256 is a widely used standard and considered very secure. What are they wanting? So that's higher risk. So they say it is high impact and unlikely. Well, if your data was taken in transit, it would be high impact. Unlikely, very true, because they're using strong... Okay, I think I see how this is wanting you to do this. The way that they have this set up is a little strange, but for CTF's sake, for things... For making an interactive challenge, they have to... You know, they can't make it perfect. I guess they're saying, okay, I see what they're doing, and I think we'll be able to get question 3 right? So, we already assessed this, we'll add the risk. What they want is to say what would happen if it was exploited, even if they don't have the controls in place. or even though they do have the controls in place, and then what the likelihood of it being exploited is. So it's not necessarily the impact of what would happen with the controls they have in place, it's the impact of what would happen if they don't have controls. So how long do you keep client data after the case is closed? That would be high impact because, you know, that's that data we worked with earlier. They categorize it as critical over in question 2. So we're gonna classify the data we have as critical as well in this one. And what's the likelihood? Possible, but unlikely in my opinion. And we could say that data is stored and could be accessed. Let's see if we got it right. Question 3, perfect. So, yeah, we figured it out. Took a second to see what TryHackMe was doing there. So they're categorizing the data that we use as critical, no matter what the data is. And then we have to judge the likelihood on their control. I'm not proud of it, but I had to start brute forcing as I wasn't fully understanding. Thanks for helping, Joseph. I mean, to be fair, for a moment there, I was brute forcing, because I did not understand what TryHackMe was doing, but I think I got it now. Complete assessment. Let's go ahead and look at Violet Raven. So question 1, data in transit. So they're using data they're encrypting the data in transit, but none at rest. So we learned that our impact for data is critical. Data at rest definitely needs to be encrypted, or should be encrypted. And I would assume that because there is none rest, they're going to call it likely. And we should say data needs to be encrypted at rest. Okay, it's higher risk now. Is it because it's only possible? Or is it because the impact is not as high? It's because the impact is not as high. And they're a little choosy with whether or not their data is critical. Alright, so question 2. Now we've got, this is a little bit better. Data can be accessed by all the people on the relevant team. Still not optimal. Data should only be accessed by exactly those who need it, but you could assume that someone on a team needs access to it. So we're gonna say possible and critical because they did describe this as critical earlier. And we can say that malicious, someone on the team who is not on the project may have access that they don't need. Yeah. And it's considered perfect. Awesome. Question 3. How long do you keep client data after a case is closed? Less than 1 week? That's amazing. So the likelihood, I'm going to say, is unlikely. 7 days. Someone would have to already be in the environment. 7 days, and we're going to say critical because they defined our data as critical. And I would say NA. And they liked that answer. So I don't know why when it's in transit our data is not as valuable as when it's in rest. That doesn't make sense to me, but for sake of the challenge, let's continue. So let's see here. What are they doing for data in transit? They are encrypting it in transit, so this is going to be exactly the same as it was earlier, possible in high. And we need to say that data needs to be encrypted at rest. Okay. Question 2. What kind of access controls do you have to ensure that data is only accessed by people, the authorized people? This seems to be almost the same, right? So only by people on the relevant team. Data, I will give it the same answer. Data may be accessed by someone on the team who is not on the project. Okay. And the impact possible with critical. And they accepted that answer as the perfect answer. Let's look at number 3. How long do you keep client data after the case is closed? More than 1 month? We're getting into the likely territory. And critical because, again, they're defining our data as critical. This may be very likely depending on how long more than 1 month is. That's kind of ambiguous. We're going to try likely first because more than 1 month could be 1 month and a week, but it also could be years. We don't know how broad they're going. Data kept more than 1 month is more likely to be accessed. Now, in reality, data is stored more than 1 month all of the time. Also, I don't know. I really do have to figure out a way to test this chat box, honestly, because I'm not seeing chats in the chat box in the preview window. Let's go ahead and try this out, by the way. Assessment can be improved. They're saying that this is lower than it could be. So we're going to go very likely. I kind of was assuming that they were going to say very likely, but again, more than 1 month is ambiguous. And they're saying that is perfect with a risk score of 16 out of 16. That's not good. So we're probably not using this company unless they're very cheap and our financial officer says so. We'll complete the assessment. So we can look at our risk register here and see their total scores. Violet Raven looking like the best. They got the least amount of risk. But now, right now, we have to start determining what is important to the company. Okay? This is where you would take this information, look at the different results we were given, and figure out what we care about as a company, right? So, for instance, I know that this company, Silver Scorpion, does keep its data for more than 1 month, and they have pretty much the same controls as Violet Raven, but if that data being stored for more than 1 month is not important to your company, maybe you are willing to accept that risk, and they're offering a lower price, you would go with that company. Let's say Violet Raven didn't have encryption in transit, and that was a risk that you were willing to accept, even though they did have encryption in transit. If that was a risk you were willing to accept, then you would go with that company for X, Y, or Z reasons. There's quite a few different things that have to be taken into account now, right? And apparently we're supposed to get a flag. Did not see a flag. What is the flag you receive after performing the risk assessment? I do not see it. Ah, THM risk managed. And then they want to know what GRC stands for. Governance, risk, compliance. Go ahead and submit both of those. And then if you enjoyed that task, look at the risk management room. And as I said, if you enjoyed that task, look at Jerry's GRC masterclass. Great class. CPA to Cyber, Steve McMichael also has a lot of great GRC content, and of course Chris Whitlock over at Study GRC does great things with GRC content. I think GRC is great. I love to make fun of it, don't get me wrong, but it's because what I do is GRC. Everything in a lot of companies is GRC. I like to make fun of it, but it is the reason that we have security controls in place, because if we didn't have regulations saying that we needed them, we probably wouldn't have them. And we need people to make sure we have these controls in place, and we need people to write the policies to do it, right? So that is it for today. Day 8. Jerry's in chat. Awesome. Click winner. I didn't click anything. Attempts remaining 1. Okay. Oh, click the winner. Oh, select the vendor with the lowest risk. Okay. I didn't read that up there. Can we confirm whether or not the chat box is working really quick while I still have people in chat? Might need to get the output. Give me a second. I'm not seeing anybody pop up, so I'm assuming no. I can see I can see Jerry's name. What in the world? I can see it twice. Okay, I think I see what happened here. Jerry's name is so big that it's not fitting in the chat box. I can see that he's typing in it. I have to figure out how to get that sorted out. Jerry says like his ego. There you go. I'm not sure. It's also like the names are on the right side, which I don't get. I don't know. But either way, we are done for today. I'm not going to make y'all sit and watch me troubleshoot OBS because that'll be painful for everybody. I enjoyed... Oh, it looks like it's working. I enjoyed today's room. I'm hoping that everybody enjoys today's room. It's pretty hard to do a GRC CTF. And I think it was done well. I mean, I think the scoring of the risk was a little weird. You know, but that's neither here nor there. Again, as I stated, while we were working through the room, you can have 3 different people judge risk and get 3 different answers. So, oh, I can almost see Jerry's name. Yeah, I'll work through this. I'll get this chat box worked out. Actually, it might be better over in this view, where everything's bigger. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, that looks much better. I mean, the names are still getting cut off, but that's fine. I liking the Christmas lights. Thanks. Thanks. I put those up today. I'm slowly making it more Christmassy for the advent of cyber. I'm slowly integrating a few things. I've got a couple like Santa hats and like, you know, ugly Christmas sweaters and all the good stuff. As we get closer to Christmas, I'll be wearing more and more of it. So I'd love to take any kinds of questions. I know today was like a little bit of an information overload. GRC is something I can talk to at length, so I did kind of babble on a little bit, I will admit. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry saying great work. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed today's room. I enjoyed today's stream. You can't see him saying great work. I gotta figure out how to fix that. I don't know how it looks in the room, but I like the illusion of it hanging in the frame. It does. I mean, Yeah, little camera magic, right? There's still another like half a room over there. There's nothing in these settings that like make it look like I can write custom code for this. Oh, jeez, it's a little too much for a chat box. 200+ subs is wild. I know. I'm very thankful. I'm very appreciative. So many people in the community helping spread the good word. I'm not even posting it about it on my own LinkedIn for some reason because I suck at social media. I really do. It's like my social media is like my least favorite thing, even though I decided to start a YouTube channel. But I'm not. I need to start doing that. But so many people have mentioned my channel, and like Tyler and Jerry and Chris and Jesse. It's very. I feel the love, and I'm very honored by it. I will. I'll probably do a test stream where I figure out this. Where I figure this out. But for now, thank you so much, everybody who do tune in. Even though today was GRC, and GRC is lame. It's always great to talk about, and it is very vital to every company. So thank you for tuning in. I will catch y'all tomorrow for day 10, which I hear, little birdie told me may also be hosted by a certain horn-rimmed glasses-wearing, clipboard-wielding GRC rockstar. So, see y'all tomorrow, and have a good evening and rest of the night. Bye.